Now we go to oleander. Another very interesting skin medicine. We prescribe for acute itching as well. You know, if you think of Mr. Oleander, when they come home after work, when they come back home, it's generally the time to relax. But whenever Mr. Oleander starts to undress his clothes, that's when his symptoms exacerbate. That's when his symptoms aggravate. So it's one of your leading remedies for itching worse from undressing. You see, again, this is a very interesting area because if you look in your repertoire, you'll find lots of remedies. But again, I'm coming to you from Metromedica point of view, where there are certain remedies I have found, which I have learned, which act really well with certain modalities. Like whenever I get this modality, it can be acute, it can be a chronic, I have used oleander as an intercurrent. So itching, any itching, anywhere, it could be a chronic psoriasis, eczema, just an acute skin condition. But the patient is telling you, whenever I undress, whenever I open my clothes, the itching aggravates, and that's a gem indication for oleander. So that's one of the very important things. You see, I mentioned here aggravation, undressing. Second important thing for oleander, which works again to its benefit, is it's a medicine which has aggravation from eating citrus fruits. So any citrus fruits they eat, and it aggravates their skin condition. So especially if you think of lemon, if you think of oranges, they eat, and citrus fruits aggravates the skin condition. That's a very interesting indication for oleander. Clark mentions in his dictionary of Metromedica. They like citrus fruits, but citrus fruits aggravates. Tubercular craves for things which makes them sick. So that's another useful indication for oleander. So these are two indications where you can think of oleander. Itching worse from undressing, I've prescribed with very good results in many skin conditions, and especially the friction of clothes. Whenever they are opening the clothes, and that friction of the cloth and the skin, and that friction, just erupts the skin eruptions. It causes that aggravation because of the friction when they are undressing their clothes, right? And they're better by nothing actually. They are generally worse from that oranges, citrus fruits aggravates.
But when we have clothes, also some friction already.
Yeah, but there can be sometimes, but when especially here is when that act of opening, it aggravates them because that there's more friction during that opening time, act of opening the clothes. But I agree, yes, even the slightest friction that they feel like a little itch, but whenever they're opening completely, that aggravates it completely, right? So that's one of the very useful areas for oleander. I want you to have a look in Boricae for oleander, please. I want you to use this medicine with really good results. You see, if you look under skin, it mentions very sensitive skin. Slightest friction causes soreness and chapping. So any friction, it causes the skin symptoms to aggravate. You got that? Slightest friction causes soreness and chapping. Exfoliation as well. And especially it is worse from, you see in the modality section, worse undressing, worse friction of clothes. So even if they are not undressing as you mentioned, even the touch, that friction, it causes the itching. Again, you'll think of Hipersulf, but Hipersulf, you understand there's more pus and more pain rather than itching. Right? You understand what I mean? Hyper is more pus and more pain, which is worse from friction, worse from touch. But here it's more itching, which is worse from friction, which is worse from touch. So that's a very important area for oleander. Very sensitive skin, and do highlight that friction of clothes, undressing aggravates for your oleander. You with me?
Mostly itching.
Not mostly, totally, only itching.
Only itching.
Only
not,
itching.
Not others.
Not pain, nothing. Just itching, which is worse from contact of clothes, which is worse from undressing. So that's a very important area for your oleander.
No lesion.
No lesion can be, but undressing aggravates. Not so much pain like hyper. Okay, so that's about your oleander.
No specific size of body.
No, anywhere.
Groin.
Anywhere. It could be anywhere. You have to prescribe this on the modality. It's just a modality based prescription. There's also medicine where I'll talk about it when I come to acute itching. Right? So this is really useful. 30C is the choice of potency for oleander. Another very, very important medicine and a very good picture to depict this one. Sorinum. Another medicine without which any discussion on skin is incomplete is Sorinum. Right? I'm in page 5 of your handout. 4, in fact. If you look at the skin, you'll notice that it's like a dry, unwashed appearance of the skin. Very classic picture of Sorinum. A dry, unwashed appearance of the skin. Right? Secondly, which you can notice in this picture as well, you'll see a lot of crust in Sorinum, which is very again specific for Sorinum. If you see in the picture I've mentioned here, dry, lustreless skin. So very dry, lack of secretion, sora. Secondly, as I shared with you, it's a crusty appearance. Although crust is psychotic, but Sorinum has that ability to cover crust in the skin. So you see the thickening in these areas, there is crust, yellowish and crust. These are psychotic symptoms, but still Sorinum covers that. You're with me? Thirdly, which is interesting for Sorinum, is you'll get a very bad smell with the skin eruption. Very offensive, like sulfur as well. Right? And very interestingly, Sorinum can have an oily skin as well. Again, you see these are psychotic symptoms, but Sorinum has the ability to cover that. You're with me? So, one of the things which many people miss out for Sorinum is crust. Right? Dry, lustreless appearance can be there for Sorinum, but crust is a very important added feature in Sorinum. Right? One thing which makes Sorinum better is sweating and summer. Skin symptoms of Sorinum are generally worse in winter, whereas for sulfur it is worse in summer. Right? But even N.M. Chaudhary mentions skin is worse in summer, better in winter. Very interestingly, N.M. Chaudhary or Clark, I can't recollect clearly. Skin is worse in summer, better in winter. But yeah, so there is a controversy with that as well. But generally the skin is worse in winter. They're chilly patients, but skin is worse in winter. But 2 or 3 authors mention that even they can be worse in summer, better in winter. So the reverse can be there for Sorinum as well. So don't hold that as a landmark or as a keynote symptom that there has to be worse in winter. So that can be there for Sorinum as well. Can you tell me 3 important differentiations between sulfur and Sorinum? First tell me 2 common features between sulfur and Sorinum. 2 common features?
One skin.
Just skin. Dry. Good. Number 2?
Itching.
Offensive. Yes. Number 3? Unwashed appearance of the skin. Right? I'll say these are 3 common features between sulfur and Sorinum. That's why I was sharing with you. Look and diagnose the skin. Look at the skin, a sulfur skin, a Sorinum skin, both will appear dry. Both will appear unwashed. Right? Both will have a smelling discharge, offensive, filthy smell. Now, how to differentiate between sulfur and Sorinum? I'm just talking about skin, forget generals. Who will have more itching, sulfur or Sorinum? Yes, sulfur will have more itching. Itching causing?
Splash.
Breathing. Sexual.
More burning and redness. You don't have burning in sorinum. That's one of the very, very basic differentiations between sulfur and sorinum. You remember, sulfur is the trio of burner: arsenic, phosphorus, sulfur. So you have, whenever it can cause burning or redness. You're with me? So that's the syphilitic and tubercular component of sulfur. But in case of sorinum, you don't have any burning at all. So that's one of the very innate differentiations between a sulfur and sorinum. What will make sulfur better? Cold application. Sorinum is not better by cold. Sorinum is better by sweating generally. So perspiration makes sorinum better. You with me? Perspiration makes sorinum better. Sulfur is better from cold. If you think of look of the skin, sulfur skin may look red because of that itching, because of that congestion. But sorinum skin looks more crusty, as I shared this with you. Look at the picture, it's more crusty in sorinum. You will never have crust in sulfur. So again, on the basis of look of the skin, you ask one or two symptoms, you can differentiate between sulfur and sorinum. A, do you have burning? Yes, sulfur. Sorinum, no. B, are you better by cold? Yes, sulfur. Sorinum, no. C, are you better from sweating? No for sulfur. Yes for sorinum. D, you look at the skin, are there any crust? Yes for sorinum, no for sulfur. You look at the skin, is there a lot of redness? Yes for sulfur, no for sorinum. You understand what I mean? So these are few very interesting innate differentiations. Now, obviously, you have hot, one is hot, one is chilly. So even I am not putting that big picture into the spectrum. But again, like slum prescribing, you look at the skin and you can prescribe on the basis of that. Whenever it looks dry, but there is a redness with that, look at the sulfur better. It looks dry, there is crusty appearance with that looks sorinum better. There's a lot of burning, that looks more for sulfur. There's a lot of crust, that looks more for sorinum. Better from cold, sulfur. Better from sweating, sorinum. Alright? Very close appearance of the skin because of the dry component, because of the unwashed component. Also the smell. But you see, even if you do not take the broader picture, think of skin, but there's still innate differentiations between the two remedies. And that is very, very important to understand. Because both are leaders of the kingdom of Sora. Sulfur is the grandson and sorinum is the granddad.
Grandson and granddad.
One is sitting near the fire, the other is sitting near the air. But more than arsenic, with arsenic skin symptoms, this is the medicine I prescribe very, very, very often. And I don't know if you have prescribed this, but it works. Another fantastic medicine. Especially for chronic psoriasis, chronic skin lesions. Kaliars is a beautiful medicine to prescribe. Patient comes and tells you, my itching starts at midnight and ends at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, what is arsenic time of aggravation? 12 to 2. Kali, 2 to 4. So 12 to 4. Right? Kaliars.
It's a mutual agreement.
Mutual agreement, yes. Symbiosis. Another very important medicine for itching worse from undressing, but in chronic cases. I shared with you oleander, which you can prescribe in acute, but Kaliars is a medicine which is more favorable for chronic skin conditions. It's a very, very useful chronic psoriasis medicine. I want you to have a look in Borike, please, for Kaliars. We get a lot of Kaliars patients in UK who are war veterans, who are soldiers who have returned from the war. Why? War veterans, soldiers who have returned from the war. You remember Kelly's very routinistic, very dutiful, very work focused, right? So really served well for their country in the war, right? They saw people die in front of them. They saw their friends being killed in front of them. They come back from the war, they develop panic attack. They develop night terrors. They develop the anxiety of arsenic. They develop the fear of arsenic. So very routinistic, very dutiful, very work-focused Kelly, seeing the destruction of war and getting affected by it. When he comes back, he is having panic attacks at midnight. He is having anxiety, night terrors, fear of death. You understand what I mean? With, as time progressing, he develops skin eruptions, itching, which is worse from undressing. Very, very useful, especially for post-traumatic stress disorder, in like a long-term effect. If in the background they're very routinistic, very dutiful, serving their country, patriotic, but at the same time they have been affected by the destruction of war, and due to that they develop that anxiety. You know, they've seen so many patients, they wake up in the middle of the night fearful, anxious. Very often they will develop fear of death, which arsenic has it, you know that. You understand what I mean? Resulting again is they will come back even maybe after 2 to 3 years later developing a psoriasis. Skin is the weakest link for Kelly-Ars. You with me? So, anxiety, panic attacks, night terrors, fear of death in a very routinistic, dutiful Kelly constitution. Especially who have seen the ravages of war and are getting affected by it. Still, even maybe after 5 years, 6 years from returning, they cannot cope up with that life. Now, obviously, initially, you'll think of, say, stramoniums, you'll think of opium, aconite, these remedies, but later on, Kelly-Ars is a medicine which is a good constitutional remedy in those constitutions. You understand what I mean? Initially, to take care of the night terror, you may prescribe him a stramonium. The violence remains. You remember stramonium. But later on, as a constitutional to bring down the anxiety levels, to help him with other physical conditions which develops, Kelly-Ars is a really good choice. Also have seen chronic fatigue syndrome developing in them, weakness because of the arsenic component. Kelly is weak, arsenic is weak. You remember Kelly group, sweat, backache, weakness, arsenic weakness as well. So the weakness, chronic fatigue syndrome is another added feature for Kelly-Ars. We come to one of the biggest remedies for skin symptoms, graphitis. It is such a deep acting remedy, graphitis, especially with skin diseases, that it has the ability to cover all the miasms in equal degree in graphitis. Why do I say so? Let's start from psora. If you think of graphitis, when you look at the graphitis skin, you know, graphitis is another medicine which you can look and prescribe. You need not ask a single symptom to the patient. You can look at the graphitis skin and prescribe. What is that? If you think of the sodic component, it's totally dry, absolutely devoid of any moisture. There's no moisture. That's why we call for graphitis. You think of the sodic component, parchment dryness of the skin. Parchment dryness. I'm in page 6 of your handout. Parchment dryness of the skin. It's absolutely dry. There is no moisture at all. And you know, what do you mean by parchment dry? It's not only dry, but there is also a rough appearance to it as well. So when you touch the graphite skin, it feels rough. You understand what I mean? So parchment dryness means dry plus rough. So that's one of the basic characters of a graphite is look. It's totally dry, devoid of any moisture at all. Now when you come to psychosis, graphite is prepared from black lead. So if you think of black lead, the color is black. So any graphite skin symptom, you'll get a lot of hyperpigmentation in graphitis, or we call that as blackening as well. So hyperpigmentation, or just the skin looks black and dark. So that's another very interesting feature for a graphite skin. You understand what I mean? So that's a psychotic component. Now what happens in graphite is, if you look at this picture, it looks totally dry, there is no moisture at all, devoid of any moisture. So parchment dry. You see there is patches of darkening as well, more black, it's more brownish here. Well, graphite is more black. So you get the hyperpigmentation, the darkening in graphitis. And in between the darkening, you'll get cracks in graphitis as well. So that's the syphilis of graphitis. Cracks. Can be quite deep cracks as well in graphitis. And what comes out from that cracks is a sticky honey-like discharge, which is another psychotic symptom. Sticky honey-like discharge. Looks like water but feels like honey. Thick, sticky, honey-like discharge, transparent, absolutely transparent. As I mentioned here, oozes clear but honey-like sticky discharge. It's very important for graphitis. Also, if you see here, watery, transparent, sticky fluid from the eruption, but parchment dryness of the unaffected part. So in between, wherever there is a cracks, there is the discharge. But the surrounding skin of graphitis is always parchment dry. There is absolutely no moisture. So you see the spectrum of miasmatic expressions you find with the graphitis skin lesion. You look at the skin, it looks absolutely dry. It looks dark, blackening because of psychosis. There are cracks in between, and from that cracks you will see there is discharge, oozing, which is sticky, honey-like. And what's the tubercular component? It affects the bend of joints, and it can be recurrent as well in graphitis. You see, I mentioned there are cracks, blackening of the affected area is prepared from black lead, doctrine of signature. Rawness in flexor surfaces. So these are the flexor surfaces of graphitis, where you can get the skin lesion to happen, right? So that's a very important area for a graphitis prescription. It covers all the four miasms. You have the dryness of psora, you have the blackening of psychosis, you have the sticky honey-like discharge, and there are a lot of cracks, and it affects the bend of joints with a lot of recurrent symptoms in graphitis, right? And what's the triad of graphitis? Triad? Come on, you gave the exam one day back. Yesterday, wasn't it? Triad. What's the three symptoms for graphitis? Come on. Can't forget in one day. Chilly, fatty, and costive. No, never heard of it? Constipated. Look in Boricke, it's there. I'm sure I've shared this with you.
Okay.
Chilly, fatty, costive. That's the triad of graphitis.
Chilly, fatty, costive. It's a calculation. alkali also.
Yes, like alkali because it's a carbon.